Good afternoon. My name is Susan Akram, and I am a clinical professor and director of the International Human Rights Clinic at BU Law School. This afternoon, I'm going to talk in my few minutes about one project that my students and I have been engaged in for the last 5 years. We have been researching the causes of and the laws and policies affecting the disappearance of thousands of migrants during their journeys from Central America, most of them, of course, attempting to come to the United States. It's difficult to obtain precise figures, but the Movimiento Migrante Mesoamericano estimates that in just one decade, from 2006 to 2016, between 72,000 and 120,000 migrants have disappeared, most in Mexico. From what we know, these figures are undoubtedly too low. We know that 80,000 Mexicans alone have disappeared in the last 15 years. We've just completed a report on our research and fieldwork in Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, where we met with families of the disappeared, organizations working with migrant families, academics and experts, government agencies, and migrant shelters. Our aim has been to understand why migrants leave, why they disappear, what laws and policies are in place to protect them, the gaps in those laws, and what remedies the families are demanding. Next slide, please. Why are migrants leaving their homes? Most people are forced to flee the Northern Triangle due to a combination of structural violence, organized criminal gangs, and unsustainable living conditions. The Northern Triangle countries are by far the most violent in Central and South America and have some of the highest homicide rates in the world. In addition to a staggering number of murders, the Northern Triangle countries are plagued by gang activity, extortion, systemic domestic violence, corporate exploitation of natural resources, the effects of unfair trade agreements, and US exploitative and repressive trade and border externalizing policies. Although much of the blame has been placed on rampant drug cartel and gang activity, weak political and law enforcement institutions and pervasive corruption play significant roles in perpetuating the instability and impunity that force people to migrate and then cause them to disappear. Next slide, please. One of the main problems we found in our work was that there are various uses of terms that apply to people who have disappeared or are missing. International law has specific definitions for some terms, but not for others. And national laws do not have uniform definitions of when a person has disappeared, as opposed to someone who is missing, or no localizado in Spanish. Along the migratory route, migrants are subjected to what are variously termed forcible disappearances, enforced disappearances, and non-forcible or non-enforced disappearances. Another problem is the lack of common treaty-based obligations for all of the relevant states, that is, the Northern Triangle states, Mexico, and of course, the United States. While international and domestic laws have focused almost entirely on enforced disappearances, the 5 states all have a duty to treat forcible, non-forcible, and non-enforced disappearances with the same level of attention and response as those that are enforced. Last slide, please. We have identified in our report the main legal obligations of all of the states in the region to investigate, to prosecute those responsible, to provide answers to the families, to identify and return the remains that allow respectful burials, and finally, to provide reparations for the families for their loss. We have worked with the families in each of the countries to develop a set of recommendations that are focused on the demand for a transnational mechanism, which requires all the countries to closely cooperate to fulfill each element of their obligations. The transnational mechanism builds on Mexico's recent Ley de Víctimas and the external support mechanism for search and investigation, the Mecanismo de Apoyo Exterior Mexicano de Búsqueda e Investigación. We've just had a first hearing before the United Nations Working Group on Enforced Disappearances, And we are working now on a number of additional submissions to request interventions from the United Nations and the Inter-American Human Rights mechanisms on behalf of the families. One of our main challenges is how to insist on US participation in the mechanism, a task we have begun this year in addition to the advocacy we are doing. We hope that with this effort, we will help generate some momentum for the kinds of answers and remedies families of the disappeared across the region so desperately need. Thank you.